Hello everyone, it's Foo here, and today it's very exciting because the Crown Tundra is going to release imminently, and with this DLC we are getting a ton of new Pokemon, which is really cool, all the Galarian birds and stuff. That's all really exciting. We're also getting all the old legendaries back, and loads of people have talked about how crazy powerful they're going to be with some of the buffs that they've received. But I want to talk about the other Pokemon that are coming back that no one else is talking about, because that's kind of what we do on this channel. But to tell you why you should look at these Pokemon and why they're going to be so much better than they were before, because they've all received really cool buffs. So today we're looking at the overlooked Pokemon that have received some awesome buffs that you should use in the Crown Tundra DLC. Before we get into this video, please leave a like if you enjoy the content. And I've had a look at my metrics, and apparently 263% of you aren't subscribed to this channel, which I just don't understand. So you should definitely subscribe if you want to see more. So I want to start talking about Walrein, because I think this Pokemon has received some really significant buffs that make it much better than it has been in previous generations, because it really hasn't seen much love in those generations. This Pokemon has a lot of HP and is pretty bulky. It's not the strongest thing out there though, but this generation in Pokemon Sword and Shield, it will now have access to Hydro Pump, which makes it a much stronger special attacker, which is its better attacking stat. So you can have Hydro Pump, you can have powerful Ice Beams, maybe put a Choice Specs on it, and it will hit a lot harder than it has been able to previously. It also makes for much more powerful Max Geysers, which is good in the generation of Dynamax Pokemon. So that's one reason to pick up Walrein in Crown Tundra. The other reason is a combination of buffs, the main one being that it now gets access to Sword Stance. Though its physical attack stat is lower than its special attack stat, Sword Stance is able to boost that up significantly, and it has much better physical coverage options, which is really important. Especially in Dynamax, you can have some really good coverage in your max moves. So Sword Stance allows it to boost up its attack. It also gets access to Liquidation now, which it hasn't got in previous generations, so you'd have to rely on the slightly weaker Waterfall. It also gets Icicle Spear, which is the only usable physical ice type attack that it has access to, so that's a big change from previous versions. And not only that, its ability Oblivious has got an update in Sword and Shield, so Oblivious now also blocks opponents' Intimidate abilities, which drop your attack. So in combination with Sword Stance, when you're boosting your attack, you can avoid Intimidate attack drops, and that actually means that Walrein might actually be a pretty cool surprise setup attacker, which I really like. It gets good coverage in Earthquake as well, so when you Dynamax that, you're going to be getting special defense boosts. It's already a very bulky Pokemon, so that's pretty cool. I think it's going to be a niche pick. There are better water ice types out there, like Lapras, obviously with its Gigantamax form, is going to be a very, very potent pick. But I think that there are enough reasons to look at Walrein and maybe try it out, because it's now better than it has ever been before. The next Pokemon that I want to talk about is one that I have talked about previously, but I really do think that it's worth looking at, and that is going to be Credilli. Credilli is a strange Pokemon, again very bulky, with its attacking stats not being amazing, but still being usable. One of the big selling points for Credilli is its pretty unique typing, and its access to recover with that big bulk, so it can absorb hits and recover off. The big buff that it's got access to in Pokemon Sword and Shield is that it will be able to learn Power Whip, which is very good because this Pokemon definitely needs any power boost that it can get its hands on, especially when you consider that one of its more effective sets is a Curse set. Curse boosts its attack and defense at the cost of speed. It's got very low speed anyway, so that's not an issue. But being able to boost up your attack and then have a very powerful attack and Power Whip to use, that's very valuable for Credilli. It also makes for a more powerful max move, which is very nice. Not only that, it does also get access to some other cool physical attacks in Rock Blast, which is a pretty good attack for trying to take down leads in singles battles that might have the focus sash because you hit multiple times. And also Grassy Glide, which gives you priority in grassy terrain. Now this is something where if you are considering using a Dynamax Credilli, once you set up the grassy terrain with your max overgrowth and you wait out your max turns, you'll then have priority with Grassy Glide at the end of that. I think that it's probably unlikely that you'll see the benefit of Grassy Glide, and I think Rock Blast is probably not the best rock type move either to use when you've got things like Stone Edge and Rock Slide that are a bit more consistent, although shaky accuracy because rock type moves, you know, but Power Whip is definitely a big change there. The other one that's maybe worth a quick mention is that it does get Meteor Beam, which means that a special Credilli could also be slightly more viable. If you want to run the Power Herb, you can boost your special attack using Meteor Beam and then have a very powerful rock type attack as well. And then you've got the special attack boost to go on with some Giga Drains, for example. Just a bulky Pokemon that now has a few more offensive options, which is really cool. Okay, so those have been some very niche picks. Let's go on to a slightly more standard Pokemon, which is going to be Swampert. Swampert is returning, but probably without its Mega form, which is a bit of a shame. But it's still a solid Pokemon with very good overall stats, being relatively bulky and a very high attack stat. And that's great because it now gets access to Liquidation, which it didn't get before. So it used to have to rely on Waterfall as its water type move. Liquidation hits just that bit harder and also can cause defense drops, allowing you to break through walls a bit easier. So that's very good for Swampert. It also now gets access to Bulk Up, which is really cool because it did have setup with Curse, but that drops your speed stat. Swampert isn't the fastest Pokemon, but being able to avoid that speed drop is really cool because it means that it can make sure that it always outspeeds, you know, some of the really slow walls. So that's really cool for Swampert. It's just a bit of a shame that Mega Swampert didn't come over because Mega Swampert would really appreciate Bulk Up, considering that it was usually a Rain Sweeper that relied on its speed. So Curse sets weren't as common for Mega Swampert, and it would very much appreciate Bulk Up. The last thing I want to mention is Body Press. Frequently in singles, Swamperts run bulky sets that can set up Stealth Rock, and these can be very defensive. So if you've got a high defense start, obviously Body Press is going to be helpful there. It's not necessarily the best coverage in the world. Water Ground is already pretty good coverage, and Body Press doesn't add too much, but if you are running a very defensive Swampert, it's something that you might want to consider. Now let's move on to another kind of niche Pokemon, which is going to be Spiritomb. I wanted to mention this one because Spiritomb has got a couple of interesting buffs. Spiritomb's a weird Pokemon. It's got great Ghost Dark typing, which leaves it with few weaknesses and relatively good bulk. So it's generally seen as a bulky Pokemon, but its attacking stats are pretty good. It's just never really had the moves to abuse that with. When it returns in Crown Tundra, it will have access to 2 tutor moves, one of them being Poltergeist, which is a really strong Ghost type move, and that's fantastic for Spiritomb because it really didn't have a reliable Ghost type move to use previously, and really you'd only see Shadow Sneak used. So having Poltergeist there as a powerful stab Ghost type move is fantastic, especially because Max Phantasm is so good. It will reduce the opponent's defense, making the next Max Phantasm do even more damage. So Poltergeist is huge for Spiritomb. It also will have access to Lash Out, which again is very good because it doesn't have access to anything like Darkest Lariat or Crunch. So it didn't have a great reliable dark type stab move to use. So Lash Out is also very good for Spiritomb. It will still have loads of priority in Sucker Punch and Shadow Sneak. And what's cool is you could run like a really cheeky choice band set because it gets Trick. So you could have insanely powerful Poltergeists coming off, but if you know that your opponent's going to switch into a wall, you could trick them a choice band so that they can't recover store you for days. So this is a really cool buff for a very overlooked Pokemon, and I think that Spiritomb is going to be a very fun pick overall. I've already talked about one fossil Pokemon on this list with Cradily. I now want to move on to the bird type that's just trying so hard to stay in the air, and that is going to be Archeops. Archeops is a very cool Pokemon, and it now gets access to Dual Wing Beat, which is a really big buff for Archeops. Previously, its best physical flying type move was Acrobatics, and this relies on you not having an item. So very frequently you would see Archeops with no item at all running Acrobatics, because it's still really powerful. It has an insanely strong attack stat, but it means that you can't run any item, which is definitely a big drawback. Now with Dual Wing Beat, you have a reliable flying type move. I say reliable, it can miss, but it's still relatively reliable. It hits twice, which is nice for breaking Focus Sashes, for example, and it gives you a good max airstream. So all of these things are great, and it allows you to hold an item. So you could have, for example, a Sharp Beak Archeops, which could work really well. You might want to avoid the Life Orb because of its defeatist ability, making it weaker when it drops below half health. But you could run Choice Band on this no problem, and it definitely makes it stronger than Acrobatics. But that's in terms of the physical moves, and as I've said, Archeops' physical attack is huge. But that means that a lot of people overlook its special attack stat, which is base 112, which for most Pokemon would be very high. It's just it's not quite as high as its physical attack stat. Why that's important is because from its re-release in Crown Tundra, Archeops will have access to Air Slash, which is a great flying type special stab move, which it didn't have before, and that will be really important for allowing Archeops to use more special moves. And it will also have Meteor Beam. As I've said, this is a more niche pick for the special special side, which would, if you run it with the power herb, it will allow it to get a special attack boost as well as have a really powerful rock type move. But it means that you then can run a special Archeops set because its coverage moves are already great. It just didn't have very good stab moves. So you've got stuff like Earth Power and Heat Wave there, which are really good coverage moves for Archeops' moveset, and you can now throw on the Air Slash. So I actually think that Archeops could be a really interesting either mixed or special attacker now, which it definitely couldn't be before. So loads of really interesting and overlooked Archeops buffs there. Archeops could also be paired up with Wheezing that now gets Neutralizing Gas. This will mean that the defeatist ability that is usually a big drawback for Archeops is completely, well, neutralized. So that's really good, and I expect to see that pairing tried out at least at the beginning of the Crown Tundra. Now, the last one that I want to talk about is one of my personal favorites. I really like this Pokemon. I don't think it's one of the best, but it definitely has some niches, and that is going to be Carbink. Carbink is a really pretty Pokemon. I think it looks amazing. Love its design. Previously, it was definitely relegated to only really having one, maybe two roles. The first one being a Trick Room Stealth Rock lead, and the other one maybe being a Carmine Rest Talk Pokemon because it's got insane bulk. Its defense and special defense are through the roof, but its attacking stats are so low. They're really, really low, which means that Carbink is not very threatening at all to your opponent, and they can take that and use that momentum to maybe set up their own Pokemon. Now, there are a number of reasons why this has changed this generation. Carbink has got some really interesting moves. The first one of which I want to mention is Misty Explosion. Now, on the Trick Room Stealth Rock lead set that I mentioned before, it would very frequently run Explosion, so that what you could do is set up the Trick Room and then explode straight away, so that you could bring in one of your Trick Room sweepers straight away, and that could be really, really helpful. Now it gets Misty Explosion, and that can be better because though it's not actually as powerful as Explosion, even when factoring in same type attack bonus, nothing is immune to Misty Explosion. This means that you are guaranteed to break any of your opponent's focus sashes. Whereas if they had like a ghost type Pokemon with a focus sash before, you couldn't damage them. You couldn't break that focus sash. So you'd have to waste another Trick Room turn breaking that focus sash. So I think that Misty Explosion is definitely a superior option here over Explosion for Carbink. And I think it's really nice to be able to have that option. The next move I want to talk about is a bit more of a game changer for Carbink, which is going to be Body Press. As I've said, Carbink's defense and special defense stats are through the roof. Base 150 is insane. That's way bulkier than a lot of the most defensive Pokemon out there. This means that with Body Press, even though it's not got same type attack bonus, it will be doing a ton of damage to anything that doesn't resist it if you've got a really defensive Carbink. So this is really cool because it means you can have a Carbink that actually exerts a little bit of damage pressure there. You can have it as a reliable Stealth Rocker to keep around throughout the game and get some damage off with Body Presses. With its unique typing, I think that could be a really interesting way of using Carbink. So I really like this set. I really like this addition of Body Press, and I think that it's definitely warranted for Carbink. There are a couple of more moves that it got. It got Charm, which can reduce the opponent's attack stat, which can be very helpful. And the last one that I want to mention is Sand Tomb. Now, as with most Pokemon, Carbink probably won't be able to learn Toxic in the new generation. It learned Toxic last generation because it was a TM. It's no longer a TM. But if you can transfer over a Carbink with Toxic and give it Sand Tomb, what you can then have is a trapping Carbink. Toxic the opponent, go for Sand Tomb to trap them in, causing more overtime damage, have like Protect on there, or maybe Rest and Sleep Talk, and Carbink can be a really cheeky trapper that the opponent won't see coming, getting rid of certain Pokemon. I think that's really fun to try out. Maybe a set that's like Sand Tomb, Toxic, Body Press, Protect with leftovers, that could be quite effective. So Carbink has a ton more options, which I love to see. I think it's a really fun utility Pokemon, and that Body Press is a bit of a game changer. Misty Explosion, a little bit of a better option. And that's going to conclude this video. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope I gave you some ideas and got you excited about some of the more overlooked or underrated returning Pokemon. Let me know in the comment section which non-legendary Pokemon you're most looking forward to returning in the Crown Tundra. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and consider subscribing for more content. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time when Crown Tundra has landed. Goodbye.